Oh, I am Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church, Sunday School Department, ladies class, and we're studying Exodus. I'm sorry, Exodus 19. Exodus 19, we find the children of Israel, they have left Egypt, they have escaped Pharaoh, they have gone through the Red Sea. Moses has led them 3 months into the desert now. We have watched the Lord supply their needs as they found themselves to be quite thirsty, hungry. These people, 2.5 million of them, 430 years as a slave, and this is hard for them. They don't understand many things. They have to mature a lot, and this is part of their growth. The Lord is trying to teach them how to follow Him, how to trust Him, and how to put their lives in His hands and feel comfortable about it, that He's trustworthy. We're going to find the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to find that the Lord wants to make a covenant with them through Moses. This is the second covenant that we have studied. The first covenant is in Genesis, and it's between Abraham and God. God is promising Abraham a land, a promised land, a land of milk and honey. He is promising him a huge family that will grow into a nation. To solidify that covenant with Abraham, this relationship he wants to have with Abraham, they are going to do what is common in that day and time between entities. And what they did was, say I wanted to buy some land from you, I would cut a covenant with you. And I wanted to have a relationship with you in that we could make this deal to purchase the land. So what we would do is we would take an animal, we would butcher the animal, we would cut it right down the center so that it was like a mirror half on the other side. I would lay one side on here and then lay another side here, and there would be a pathway in between. And what I would do is I would start at one end and the other person would start at the other end, and we would walk that path between the animals, the bodies of the animals. And that would be saying, we're going to be honest with one another, we're going to do what we say. If we don't, we were going to be just like this slain animal. What happened to that animal could happen to me if I don't keep my word. That's a conditional contract, or not contract, but covenant. Moses is going to have a different one. The one that Abraham had with God. God told him what animals to put down to sacrifice for his covenant. Abraham did that. He did rams, he did sheep, he did birds, he did heifers. Made a pathway between all those carcasses. Then God put him to sleep. God made him so tired he just had to curl up and take a nap, and he went to sleep. God came down and walked between the carcasses. So there was a non-conditional covenant. God took all the responsibilities. God took on the keeping of his promise. Abraham didn't have to do anything. God is saying, I am going to give you this land. I am going to grow your people into a nation. I am going to be your God. Moses didn't have to do anything. Not Moses. Abraham didn't have to do anything. Now this lesson, we're going to have a second covenant. Everything that God promised in the first covenant is still coming true. God never makes a promise and then throws the promise away. Okay? So everything there. But God is putting a proviso on it. God is changing it just a little bit, adding to it. So he's going to tell Moses in this one that yes, you're already a nation. Look around you, Moses. Here's the people. I have kept that part of the covenant for Moses, for Abraham, excuse me. I have kept that part. They have now grown. Abraham's family has grown into a nation, big enough to be a nation. I haven't done the land yet. I haven't provided for you what I promised about the land. But that's where you're going. You're going to take possession of the land. But now I want to add another proviso in that. I showed you who I was bringing you out of Egypt. You know who I am. But I want them to know. And I want to have a relationship with them. So as long as I have a relationship with them, they have a relationship with me. As long as they recognize me as their God, the only God, they can stay in the land that I provide. But if they stray from me, then I may take them out of the land and not bring them back until they call out to me again. And then I can bring them back. And then if they stray from me again, I will take them back. So this second covenant that we're going to be studying about is a covenant of tenure. Okay? So, let's start. Chapter 19, verses 1 and 2. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. I'm using the NIV version, by the way. And after they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai. Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. God is keeping his promises. Do you remember in Exodus 3, he told Moses, he said, I'll meet you again on this mountain. He talked to him there in a burning bush. And he said, as a sign, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to bring you back here. And you will worship me here. They're back. Verse 3 and 4. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Okay? Let's stop right there just for a minute. In verse 3, he called the people, this nation, the descendants of Jacob, and he also called them the people of Israel. Aren't Jacob and Israel the same person? Why did he use both names here? Because there was a great big change in Jacob at one point. That is the reason why God changed his name. Jacob was a deceiver. Jacob was a trickster. And then as he decided to come back to his homeland, he had a wrestling match with the Son of God, and he was touched on his hip, and he had a limp. And it changed his whole mind, changed his whole demeanor, because the angel of the Lord said, let me go. And he said, no, not till you bless me. He realized how desperately he needed God's blessing on his life. And at that point, God changed his name and changed him to Israel. Israel changed. That's when Israel changed. So he's saying, you are like Jacob now. You're like the descendants of Jacob. You've not matured enough to know that you need me. You've not matured enough to allow me to be your leader. And you've got to learn that. So I'm going to teach you this. And I've started in Egypt. He said, do you know how the eagles teach their little ones how to fly? When the eagle makes a nest, it's way high on the side of a craggy mountain at the top of a tree, and he takes twigs. The eagle takes twigs or sticks. They're not little bitty pieces, and he makes a great big nest. They're great big birds, but he makes a great big nest. And it is so pokey and uncomfortable on the inside. It's hard and crusty on the inside. So that eagle will go and catch a rabbit or two or three and pull the fur or the pelt, and will line that nest with fur and make it soft and comfy and secure. Then the eagle lays the eggs. The eagle is very attentive to her young. She will bring lots of food to that baby because they grow slowly, and takes care of those baby eaglets. When the eaglets have grown sufficiently that it's time for them to start to learn to fly, they don't want to leave the nest. It's comfortable. Why would you want to leave? Mama feeds you all that you need to eat. You got a comfortable place to sit, to rest. Mom watches over and keeps any predators away. What is there to make me want to leave my nest? Mama Eagle says, it's time to leave your nest. So she goes there and she stirs up the nest first so it's not cozy comfortable. Takes some of that rabbit hair and drops it out of the nest. So now the nest becomes a little uncomfortable, a little pokey, if you will. And yes, she feeds them every day, but as they get old enough that they should be learning to fly, she starts giving them less and less food. Eventually, those eaglets are more comfortable sitting on the edge of the nest, and either one will endeavor to fly like Mama does, or Mama will come up and bump it out of the nest, and it will fall from that big tall tree or that tall mountain. And just when you think it's going to land and perish on the ground against a craggy rock, here comes Mom. She swoops down and goes under and picks that baby up with those strong, flat feathers, her pinions, and she takes that eaglet back to the nest and sets it back on the nest. They do that over and over again in a matter of days till that eagle begins to get the hang of it and learns how to fly. God's doing that. He took them right up to the Red Sea when they thought nothing could help. They were going to die here. They were going to die like the eagle. They were going to crash on the ground. Here come God. Opened up the Red Sea and they went across and escaped. Here they come after 3 days' march in the desert. Moses, we're going to die of thirst. Moses, we're going to die of thirst. God says, go over there to Moran, drink. They go. It's bitter. Lord says, Moses, get that tree and throw it in that water. And the water was fresh. And then they came and said, we're starved to death. We're starved to death. We're going to die. See them falling? And God picks them up, sends manna and quail. See God training them. You get in a bad place, you can trust me. Come and ask me for help. Come and depend on me. God's trying to teach them, to bring them from Jacob to Israel, from being Jacob to being Israel, to being a nation that knew who their God was. Verse 3, God is still speaking, and notice this little bitty word. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant. Now he's saying covenant, not the law, the covenant. If you keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. He is telling Moses, God is telling Moses what his plans are for the Israelite people. They are, in his mind's eye, what he would love to see these people become is a whole nation of priests. We spoke last week of Jethro, being the first Gentile, made a profession of Yahweh. That's what he wanted Israel to be. A whole nation of priests, a whole nation of mediators between God and man. If they just would grow up enough to do that. Verse 7, so Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people, and he set before them all the words that the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, we will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. They agreed to the covenant. I think they did it a little rash. I think they did it a little quickly. I don't think they understood. But they acknowledged what God had said. And Moses went back to the Lord, to the top of the mountain. In verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. The Lord is telling Moses, he said, Moses, these people and you have sinned. I am a holy God, and I cannot be in the presence. I cannot commune with sin. So I'm going to have to protect you by putting a thick cloud between, a dense cloud between you and me. We've all been in fogs where you couldn't see your hand in front of your eyes. He says it's going to be a dense fog, cloud. But they're going to be able to hear me. And I want them to recognize that it's me. The God that brought them through the Passover, brought them through the Red Sea, that provided water for them. And the manna. I want them to know that it's me. And if they can hear me speaking to you, that will give you more credence in their eyes, and they will trust you more. You see, they had almost threatened to kill Moses a time or two when their demands weren't met in the timely fashion they wanted them to be. Already in this 3 months they've been gone, or been on the road. So he says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to come down on the mountain, inside a fog bank, so that they can't see me, but they can hear me. So in verse 10, 11, and 12, and the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and have them wash their clothes, and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. In verse 12, put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. The Lord is telling them, we're going to have a meeting in 3 days. And I want them to be prepared. Consecrate them. Teach them, Moses, what they're fixing to do, what they're being asked to do. I want them to understand. 3 days of prayer, 3 days of thinking, 3 days of preparation. Clean your clothes. You've been in them for 3 months. Give them a bath. These are slaves. Remember, they've not had the opportunity to own a lot of clothes. Some of them may have just had the one set of clothing that they're wearing. He said, have them wash all their clothes, get their bodies clean, and get ready, because I'm coming. And oh, by the way, Moses, when I touch foot on this ground, when I come, my presence comes on this mountain. Do you remember what I asked you at the burning bush? I said, take off your shoes, because you are, do you remember? You're on holy ground. Moses, this mountain's going to be holy. And they mustn't set a foot on it. Holiness cannot be with sinfulness. They need to maintain a separation so that they're safe. God is really concerned for their safety. He doesn't want anything to happen to them. So he's warning Moses to warn them. In verse 13 through 15, God's still speaking here, and he says, they are people who transgress and step over onto the mountain like they're going to follow Moses up. He said they are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. He's saying, if they come across like they're going to come up the mountain, you shoot them down with arrows or stones or whatever, and when they fall, you don't go get them. You don't go over there to touch them, because then you're just as guilty as they are. Don't approach them. The same thing about any animals. Any of your domesticated animals, no. When you're in your camps and you hear the ram's horn blow, when you hear the shofar, then you may approach the bottom of the mountain. Not come up on it, but approach it. In verse 14, after Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them. They washed their clothes. And then he said to the people, prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations. This is not a time to seek your own pleasure. This is the time for you to prepare. A time of prayer, a time of reflection of what God has already done for you, what he did in Egypt and what he's done for you since we left Egypt, and be prepared to meet him on the third day. Verse 16, 17, 18. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning and a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, and everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in a fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. What are we seeing and hearing here? And I might even add smelling. Okay? On the morning of the third day. This is Easter Sunday as I'm talking to you. And the Lord likes the third day, doesn't he? Here he does. Thunder and lightning, no rain. A thick, dense, dark cloud. Everyone knew, everyone saw, everyone heard the thunder, everyone saw the lightning, everyone was capable of knowing that something very strange was happening up on the mountain, and they'd been told that it was going to be God's arrival. And then Moses told them it's time to gather, come toward the mountain. Now the ground would have been quivering. In fact, it's more than quiver. It said it shook violently. Can you see the little children running to Mama? Can you hear the animals frightened, bleating? Can you see their reticence? They're not so sure they want to go near that mountain. 19 through 21. As the sound of the trumpet, the shofar, grew louder and louder, Moses spoke. What did he say? We're not told. What do you think he said? I'm strictly going by what other people have said in Genesis and what people say in the rest of the Old Testament and in the New Testament. It says, here I am, Lord. Here I am. Maybe that's what he said. The Lord said to him, go down. Let's see. The sound of the trumpet grew. The voice grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. Now, you remember what God told Moses, that the people would be able to hear his voice? The people are hearing this exchange. How would you feel if you audibly heard the voice of God today? I don't know what you're doing as you're watching this, but what if you turned around and there stood the Lord? Or as you're listening to this, you hear another voice come across and say, "What are you doing?" Well, I think I would be just like the children of Israel. I would be pretty frightened. The Lord descended to the top of Sinai, called Moses to the top of the mountain, so Moses went up. And the Lord said to him, almost immediately, "Go down, warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish." Moses had already given all these instructions to the Israelis, but now, as the Lord tells him to come up, he goes up, and God said, "Go right back down there." Tell him again. You see, the Lord can read the mind and the heart of that 2 million people down there. He knew some of them was thinking, why just Moses? Why can't I go up closer to God? I want to see what I can see. I want to watch. I want to be close. I want to listen. God heard this. He heard these thoughts. He heard these words. And he said, "Moses, turn around and go back down and warn them again. There's people down there that didn't pay attention to your instructions, and I don't want to start this out with a whole bunch of dead people." 22, 23, 24, and 25. God says, "Even the priest who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." You know, we don't have priests yet. Why did the Lord say even the priest? Well, he said that because, do you remember in Exodus 13 when we had all of the firstborn that were spared were to be dedicated to the Lord? In essence, they became his priest. Okay? So maybe these people who realized they were spared because they were the firstborn thought that they had a special in or a special exemption from God because they were the firstborn and had been spared once. I don't know. Maybe they did. But they were making thoughts and maybe even physical movements toward the mountain. And God said, "I don't want them to perish. Moses, go stomp them." He's saying even the priest must consecrate themselves. I don't want to do away with them. I don't want to hurt these people. 23, Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." He said, "God already told them all this. Why do this 80-year-old man, have to go back down this mountain and tell them that again? They already know him." The Lord just says right stridently, "Go down, and you can bring Aaron up with you. But the priest and the people must not force their way through to come to the Lord, or he will break out against them." So Moses went down to the people, and he told them. I kind of wonder if Moses' brother Aaron wasn't one of the ones that was wanting to come up to the mountain and be beside Moses as he spoke with God. I don't know. But anyway, the people could hear this. Wonder what they made of it. Wonder if you were one of those firstborn young men who was maybe turning to their neighbor and saying, "You know, I was spared in Egypt for a reason, and I think the Lord would understand if I want to go up and be a witness to this myself." And then they hear the Lord say, "Moses, go down and stop them. I'll do away with them. They will perish." When God says something, he means it. When he says something good to you and it's a wonderful thing, he keeps his promises and he loves his children. But you know, discipline is part of love. And these people have to learn discipline to take the Lord at his word, and so do we. I hope you enjoy your day today, and I will see you next week.